It's finally autumn, so that means I can now share this pattern for these crochet pumpkin bag charms. Hello everyone and welcome to Joys It Flies. If you're new here, my name's Alyssa and I deal with the crochet side of this channel. I really hope you guys like this tutorial. I loved making it and let's get into it. For this tutorial, you're going to need some yarn in 3 different colours. The first one is a colour for your pumpkin. You could use orange, you could go for a classic pumpkin colour, or you could use a red, a brown, whatever you'd like. The next colour is green for your leaves. I've used this lovely one here. I thought it worked so well with the orange. And last but not least, some brown yarn for the stem of your pumpkin. Now you want all of your yarn to be relatively thin and lightweight. As you can see with this one here, it's quite thin. If you use a yarn that's too chunky, you're going to end up with a very big pumpkin and it's just going to look a little bit funny on your bag. So make sure it's quite nice and thin. Then you're also going to need a crochet hook. You will be using, for this pattern, a 3mm crochet hook. You can see right there, nice and thin. Then you're going to need a pair of scissors, a darning needle, some toy stuffing or some scrap fabric, something just to stuff your pumpkin with, and finally a key ring. You could use one like this that has an extra little loop on it, or you could simply just use one of the round metal key rings. Both of them work absolutely perfectly. Now for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to be using this yarn here. It's a lot thicker, it's a lot chunkier. I wanted to do this just so that you can see what stitches I'm actually making. I'm also going to be using a 4mm hook, again just so that it's a bit bigger and you don't get confused because you can't see what stitches I'm making. So now that we have everything, let's get into the tutorial. We're going to begin by making the pumpkin. Taking the coloured yarn that you are using, make a slip knot. Then you can pop that on your hook. And now from here we are going to chain 15. So yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over, pull through. So go ahead and make your chain of 15. Once you have your chain, we're going to look at the second chain from our hook. So we have 1 and 2. Into that second chain, we're going to make a half double crochet. Yarn over your hook, insert it into that second chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And we're going to repeat that all the way down our chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain and make your half double crochet. So go ahead and repeat that all the way along, making 1 half double crochet into each of your chains, and I'll meet you back when you've done that. And that's the end of row 1. Now for row 2 and onwards, we're going to begin by chaining 1. This chain 1 does not count as a stitch. Then turn your work. If you have a look at the tops of your stitches, you can see that there's a front loop, which is this one right here, and then a back loop. We're going to be working into that back loop. Into every single stitch, you're simply going to make 1 half double crochet. So starting in that first stitch, yarn over your hook, insert it into that back loop, and then you can make your half double crochet exactly as we did before. Then into the next stitch, working into that back loop, we have our second half double crochet. So go ahead and work along your row, making 1 half double crochet into the back loop only, and I'll meet you back when you've done that. And that's the end of row 2. So you're going to go ahead and repeat row 2 until you have 18 rows in total. So that's this row right here. So go ahead, work up until you have 18 rows, and I'll meet you back when you've done that. So I finished making my 18 rows, and this is what I've got. Now from here, we are going to fold this rectangle in half so that the shortest sides match up. Now from here, chain 1 and turn your work. We're now going to join these two sides together, and to do that we're going to work slip stitches all the way down into both pieces. To do this, find the first stitch, insert your hook into the front piece and then also into the back piece, and then make your slip stitch. So yarn over, pull through those pieces and then pull straight through the loop on your hook. Then into the next stitch, we have the front piece and we have the back piece. Then your slip stitch. So you're just going to work in this way all the way down the short side until both sides are joined together. There we are, that's all joined together nicely. Then from here, we are going to chain 1 to fasten off our work. And then you want to leave quite a long tail end. And the reason why we want to do this is because we are going to sew with this tail end. We're going to sew the top of our pumpkin closed. There you go, you can pull that through, pull it nice and tight. And there we are, that's the first part of our pumpkin done. Now that we've done that, we're going to sew one of the sides of our pumpkin closed. And to do that, we're going to need our darning needle. Taking the long tail end that we left, you want to thread that onto your darning needle. And then from here, we're simply going to weave in and out around the very top edge of our pumpkin. So I like to go in one side, like this, and then back in the other way. I can't really explain it very well. I think you can probably see better on the video. I'm the worst at explaining this. But you can see that I'm just catching the very edge of the stitches. So you're going to work in this way, sewing around the top edge of your pumpkin until you reach back to where you've started. So as you can see, I'm just nearing the end now. I'm back to where I started. Now this is the fun part. If you hold sort of your pumpkin steady and you pull on that tail end, it is going to close your pumpkin up. Hopefully it's going to give it, you can give it a good tug until that's all closed up. Then from here, if you have any remaining gaps or holes, you can simply just sew those closed. Again, there's not really a science to this, just, you know, sew across, close up that gap like I'm doing here. Make sure you pull it really nice and tight. You don't want any stuffing potentially coming out of the bottom of it. There we are, I'm happy with that. And to finish off, I like to just thread my needle through my pumpkin, up out through that gap here, like this. And then I like to just tuck the loose tail end that I have back into my pumpkin. And there we are, that is the first side of our pumpkin all sewn up. Now that we've done that, we are going to stuff our pumpkin. So grab your toy stuffing, your yarn scraps, your fabric scraps, whatever it is you're using, and stuff your pumpkin. So I'm pretty happy with the shape of that now. I don't think I'm going to add any more stuffing. Once you are also happy with your pumpkin, we are then going to sew the top of it up. We're going to sew this open side up in exactly the same way as we sewed the other side. So to do this, you are going to need some yarn, a nice long bit of yarn, and your darning needle, and you are going to sew all the way around this top edge in exactly the same way as we did for the other side, and you can then close that gap up in the same way, and you can sew closed any remaining holes or gaps that you might have. So go ahead, let's do that together, and that will then be the first part of our pumpkin done. So as you can see, I'm just sewing around in exactly the same way, just catching the very edge of those stitches. And then I'm back near to where I started. And just as before, if you then hold onto your tail ends and your pumpkin, you can then give that a good old tug to close that up. Just pop any extra bits of stuffing inside if they start to come out. And then from here you can cut. I like to cut the tail ends, and I like to knot it. Just like to tie that in a good knot so that it's nice and secure and tight. This is just the way I do it. If you guys have a better way of doing it, please do that. And then I like to just sew this hole closed with my remaining tail ends, and that's going to keep that nice and secure. And there we are. As you can see, our pumpkin, or the first part, of our pumpkin is done now. So from here, we are going to go ahead and make the remaining parts, and then we can sew them all together at the very end when we've got everything together. So we're now going to begin to make the stem. For this, you want to be using your brown yarn. I'm using the same coloured yarn again because the brown didn't show up. You couldn't see a thing that I was doing with the brown yarn. So for the sake of the tutorial, I'm using this beige yarn instead. You're going to begin by making a slip knot, which you can then pop on your hook. And then from here, we're going to chain 6. And there we go, I have 6 chains in total. Now we're going to find the second chain from our hook. And starting in that chain, we are going to make a half double crochet all the way along into each chain. So yarn over your hook, insert it into that second chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. And you're just going to do that into every single chain. There we go, our next half double crochet, and all the way down. So you should end up with 5 half double crochet in total. And again, just as a reminder, you should be using your brown yarn for this. Once you've done that, you can then chain 1 to fasten off. And again, we're going to leave a nice long tail end because we're going to need it for sewing with later. You can pull that through. And there you are, that's now the stem done. It's a really easy, simple step. Now we're going to make the leaves, and for this you want to be using your green yarn. We're going to begin by making a slip knot, as we always do. And you can pop that onto your hook. Then from here, we are going to make a chain of 15. There we are, there's my chain of 15. Then from here, we are going to find the second chain from the hook. And into that, we are going to make 2 single crochet. So insert your hook into that second chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through both of those loops. Then back into the same chain, we have our second single crochet. And you're going to repeat that into every single chain all the way along. So into the next one we have our first single crochet, and then our second single crochet. So go ahead and work along making 2 single crochet into each chain, and I'll meet you back when you've done that. And there we are. Hopefully your leaf should have curled like mine. You can see it's created this little spiral, which is perfect for our pumpkin. Now from here, once you have finished that, you can then chain 1 to fasten off. And again, you are going to leave a lovely long tail end because we are going to use that to sew with. You can then pull that through. And there we are. That is our finished leaf. So you want to go ahead and create a second one of these. You should then end up with 2 leaves in total. So go ahead, do that, and I will meet you back when you've finished. So I finished making both of my leaves. You can see they're looking very pretty. Now you might notice on one of them, this one here has a short tail end. That is fine. We're only sewing one of our leaves to our pumpkin, which is why it needs a longer tail end. The other leaf is being attached directly to our keychain, so if it has a bit of a shorter tail end, that's absolutely fine. We now have one more thing to make, and that is the long keychain part. So for this, you want to be using your green yarn. Begin by making a slip knot. Then from here, we are going to chain 50. Now, if you would like your keychain to be longer or shorter, you can chain more or less. This part is completely customizable. You can make it as long as you want. I found 50 just worked quite well for me. This is just a standard size. So go ahead and work your chains. There we are. I have my 50 chains all done. Then from here, you are going to find the very first chain all the way back here. So it's this one right here at the end. And you are going to make 1 single crochet into it. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through both loops. Then from here, you can chain 1 to fasten off, and you can leave a long tail end. I'm so sorry, you lot are probably so fed up of hearing those words. But we just need, there's a lot of things to sew together. And there you are. That is now the keychain part done. That was a really simple step. You can see it's a nice long keychain. And now we are going to go ahead and we are going to assemble our pumpkin together. So we should have our main pumpkin part, our stem, which is in brown. We should then have both of our leaves. You can see one with a tail end. And this one I've already sewn the short tail end in with my darning needle. We then have our long keychain part. We then have our metal keychain, and we're also going to need our darning needle. Now the first step is to take the leaf with no tail end in, this one here, and you can simply thread that onto your keychain. So you can see I'm just going to poke that through, and I'm going to thread that on. So that's going to sit like that. We can put that to one side, and we're now going to assemble our pumpkin. So you're simply going to sew all of these pieces onto the top of your pumpkin. So I like to sew my stem on first. I like to align that in the center, sew that one on. Then I like to sew my leaf on, kind of just on the side there, so it hangs down a bit over your pumpkin. And then finally, I like to sew the keychain part on last, again in the center. So let's go ahead and do all of that. And there we are. I've now sewn all the parts of my pumpkin together, and we just have one final step left. You want to take your metal keychain, the one that has the second leaf attached to it, and you can then thread the long green keychain part of your pumpkin through it, just like this. And that means that the metal part up at the top can attach to your bag, and your pumpkin can then hang down. Now you might be looking at this and going, this is not a pumpkin, Alyssa, this is disgusting. It doesn't even look like a pumpkin.
Ugh. Brother, ugh.
Do not worry, this is not what your pumpkin should be looking like. I have made an actual version with the correct yarn and the correct hook size, and this is what it looks like. I honestly think that this is so cute. I think it's the perfect autumn accessory for your bag. I actually think it's one of my favourite patterns I've made. I really hope you guys have all enjoyed this tutorial. If you've got any questions, make sure you let me know in the comments box down below. I'll see you all again next week in my next video, but until then, happy crocheting.